Live from Washington, you're watching Access Point, and I'm Aisha Tanzim. Hello and welcome. Pakistan's finance minister has announced that the country will be negotiating a new deal with the IMF, but on its own terms. What does that mean? We'll ask the IMF mission chief to Pakistan, Jeff Franks. Plus, what can or cannot the budget achieve? We'll ask Dr. Zubair Iqbal of the Middle East Institute. Gentlemen, welcome. And we will also have people's opinions in this show with Sarah Zaman, who's standing by for us. But first, Jeff, starting with you, Pakistan wants to negotiate on its own terms. What should we get from that?
Well, I think that's a positive thing. We in the IMF don't want to impose policies on a country. We want to adapt and do something that will fix the issues that the economy is addressing, but in a way that is appropriate and supported by the population and by the ruling party.
In 2008, a deal was negotiated and the government did not do what the IMF wanted. That deal was pulled midway.
Well, there's a long history of programs between Pakistan and the IMF, and there have been some failures in the past where after some period of time, things went off track. Obviously, our objective in any new program, and I think the government's objective, would be to try to break that cycle and have a successful program that is successful not just in financial terms, but successful for the people of Pakistan.
Dr. Iqbal, you're also a former IMF guy. Some people are saying that in this budget, the government has already done what the IMF wanted it to do, at least the basic minimum requirements, and that this rhetoric about on its own terms is for domestic consumption. What do you think?
Well, I don't think the budget has done much. The budget is fine because it does talk about the good things to be done, but the budget really doesn't have the instruments that need to be used in order to achieve the objectives. And that's where the issue of the IMF will come in, because the IMF will demand actual implementation of instruments. That's where the decisions haven't been made yet, and that's where the negotiations will take place between the IMF and Pakistani authorities.
Now, we'll talk about what the budget has or it doesn't have, but a lot of expectations from a new government, from the budget. We want to hear what people want to see in this budget or what people think the budget has or does not have. Let's go to Sarah Zaman, who's standing by on our social media desk. Sarah?
Aisha, as we've seen on TV, the increase in GST and no pay raise for government employees are two main things that people are criticizing in this budget. On our social media platforms too, I'm seeing a lot of comments along the same lines. Mohammed Amir says this can be summarized as a budget for the rich and the capitalist class. There's nothing in it for the poor. It's painful for white-collar workers. Maruf Hussain says this government is trying to buy the youth with laptops. Salaries of government employees haven't been increased, but taxes have. We cannot accept this budget. And Adil Shah, however, disagrees. He says the finance minister and his team have done a fine job and that this budget provides the foundation for an emerging economy. We also had the chance to talk to a few people on the streets in Pakistan. Let's hear their thoughts on this.
अभी तो नई गवर्नमेंट आई है, एक हफ्ता हुआ है और बजट तो हमें इस पे तवक्को करनी नहीं चाहिए आगे जो बजट होगा, लेकिन एक दो चीज़ें जो देखी है मैंने कि तेल पे ऊपर और चीनी के ऊपर जो टैक्स लगाया जा रहा है, इसके अलावा गैर ज़रूरी बहुत सारी चीज़ें जिसके ऊपर लगाया जा सकता है टैक्स, ये दवाइयों के ऊपर या खाने पीने की अशिया पे जो है वो लोगों को रिलीफ मिलना चाहिए।
तनख्वाहें बढ़ने से कोई ये तो नहीं है कि आपकी इकानमी ठीक हो जाएगी, या तो इकानमी को कंट्रोल करें फिर ही कुछ बात बन सकती है।
So our first commenter wishes GST on food, fuel and other daily use items had not increased. But the second commenter says that increasing government employees' salaries would not solve any problem either. Now, to read more comments and share your thoughts with us, log on to Facebook and you can either go to Access Point with AT or on VOA Urdu's page. Back to Aisha.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Now let's talk a little bit more about IMF. Jeff, you guys are going to Pakistan next week to talk about whether a deal is possible or not possible. What will you be asking of Pakistan?
Well, we are going to conduct our annual review of the Pakistani economy called the Article 4 consultation. We're not going to agree on a program right now. We will have broad discussions, not just with the government, but people in civil society, with the business sector, with other political parties, to get a broad idea of where the economy is and what needs to be done.
Dr. Iqbal, what do you think the Pakistani government will ask of the IMF, and how soon do they need a deal? Because as you've mentioned in the past, Pakistan is going to default soon if it doesn't start paying on its loan payments.
Well, that's a good question. See, the point is the following. Pakistanis still have a bit of a room to negotiate an arrangement with the IMF under which basically an effective rolling over will take place. The point that underlies the whole issue at this moment is how soon can the authorities put together the package of instruments that are required to achieve their objectives? That is a primary problem because the authorities have not as yet had time to be able to do it. They have talked about it, they've got a general principle in place, they've got even a strategy in place, but no instruments.
Jeff, from the IMF's point of view, what is it in the budget that you like and what is it that you don't like?
We're still looking at the details of the budget. It was released very recently, and so our experts will be looking at this in greater detail when we get on the ground next week. But the preliminary impression I would have, let me share a couple of thoughts. The first is I think that some positive signals were sent in this budget. The signal has been sent that we cannot continue in a situation where Pakistan is living far beyond its means, and that some adjustments need to be made. And there have been some proposals in the budget for some of those adjustments. And I think that's a good signal, it's a good first step. Whether those adjustments go far enough to actually bring the deficit down to the 6.3% of GDP that has been proposed is something that we'll have to look at a technical level. But it is, I think, a positive thing that a new government is coming in and saying, we can't be free spending, we have to be responsible in our management, and this is, here are some concrete steps to get there.
Now, let me, before I come to you, Dr. Iqbal, Shahid Javed Burki, the former vice president of World Bank, has just joined us. I'm told the phone line is dropped, but we'll have him back, don't worry, soon. Dr. Iqbal, you talked about instruments. What is it in the budget that you're not seeing that worries you?
All right, it's not enough, that's my concern. A 1 percentage point increase in GST doesn't do much. Similarly, a reduction in a few SROs makes very little difference. The reality is the authorities haven't as yet come to grips with the reality. The reality is that they're looking at the short-term problem, but the long-term and the medium-term problem is much more serious. They cannot just simply take care of the short-term problem and assume everything else will fall into place. They talk about reducing the budget deficit over a 3-year period. They want to improve the balance of payments position over a 3-year period. They want to increase the growth of the economy over that period. But I don't see any instruments. I don't see a mechanism whereby investments will increase, savings rate in the country will improve, therefore improve the external position. Nothing of that is as yet clear.
You mentioned the GST 1%. It's not going to make a big difference, but is GST a good way, Jeff, to tax people when it's an indirect tax that the rich and the poor both pay? Is it internationally considered a good way to tax, or should they have done something different?
Well, we have had a long-standing discussion with Pakistan about moving from a GST to a value-added tax, which is what most countries use, and is a more efficient indirect taxation system. But setting aside that issue, because
Explain to our viewers what a value-added tax is and how it's different from GST.
Well, a value-added tax is a tax where at each stage of production, a tax is levied on the value that is added at that stage. So when an initial producer produces a product and sells it to the wholesaler, it has a certain price, and there's a tax on that. Then the wholesaler sells it to the retailer, there's a margin there that is taxed, and then the retailer sells it to the public, there's a tax there. The reason why that's an advantage, because at each stage of production, revenue can be collected, and there can be cross-checking between the different suppliers to make sure that the tax is collected. Now, what we have in Pakistan right now, the GST, is sort of a hybrid. It's not a true sales tax, but it's not a true VAT either. And frankly, it has some of the worst characteristics of both. So we would love to see an opportunity to move to a pure VAT regime. But that's politically very controversial, and that's not something that the IMF is going to insist on. Assuming that we stick with the GST is one valid mechanism. But what's the problem with the GST in Pakistan right now? It doesn't have broad coverage. It's full of loopholes and exemptions, and therefore it's a very inefficient way to collect revenue. It's not that the GST per se is such a bad thing. It's that when you put all the loopholes in and you exclude entire sectors of the economy, you can't raise very much.
Dr. Iqbal, worldwide, usually direct taxes are the major chunk of the taxes. That's what happens in US, that's what happens in most of Europe and other countries. In Pakistan, direct taxes are not the major chunk. Indirect taxes are. And PMLN put it in its manifesto that it will change that or try to. Do you think any effort, do you see any effort in the budget?
Well, that's the problem. The budget doesn't make any effort. It just talks about exhortation towards that. I don't think you can say that the direct taxes are a good tax structure or better way of collecting revenue. A well-done value-added tax is actually a better tax because it is more efficient. Now, the presumption is that it is not progressive. It can be made progressive. And I'm sure the IMF has done it in other places. That shouldn't be a problem. The point that really you boil down to is the following. The ability to implement taxation in Pakistan or collect revenue is very limited because of bad governance, corruption, or whatever you want to call it. So unless and until you can improve that governance process, it's meaningless to talk about new and more complex taxes. And that's one thing that the government ought to do and do it very quickly. Otherwise, even their own objectives.
Revamp the FBR.
Precisely. And similarly, ensure that their own supporters pay taxes. It's critical. Unless that is done, it's
People sitting in cabinet pay taxes, which we saw.
Otherwise, there is no purpose in talking about new taxes or about new mechanisms if you cannot even implement the existing mechanisms. Improve that, collect the taxes, collect the payments for the use of utilities, energy, and so on and so forth. Then you are in a position to talk about something more important and more systemic over time.
But FBR is going through a huge problem. Last year, they couldn't collect what they expected to collect. And this year, the government's asking them to collect 23% more of what they collected last year.
Yep.
Do you see that happening, Jeff? Do you think the government has the political will to overhaul FBR to that point?
Well, I do think you've mentioned the key issue. You need to have an overhaul of the FBR for that to happen. These exhortations will not be enough. You need to have a structural change in the way in which the FBR operates, the training and staffing of the FBR, and importantly, enforcement mechanisms of the FBR. The truth is, there are databases that the FBR has that allows them to identify many millions of people who are not paying taxes who should be. Why are they not collecting money from them? I think it's enforcement. It's also this inefficiency and corruption issue as well.
And a lot of them are very influential politically. I mean, PMLN's own manifesto talked about those millions of people that tax can be collected from, but we don't see that in the budget.
Ultimately, if Pakistan is going to have a successful revenue regime, it's got to be able to collect taxes from all the important people in all the political parties without favoritism.
Right.
Okay, now let's talk about, there are a lot of problems, but which sector needs immediate attention? And before I ask you guys, let's find out what the people of Pakistan think is most important to them. Let's go again to Sarah Zaman standing by on our social media desk.
All right, now we know several sectors in Pakistan are in dire need of resources and good management, but where do our commenters think a lot of attention needs to be paid? Let's hear some video comments first, and then we'll move to the ones online.
सबसे पहले तो क्राइसिस है एनर्जी के आप देख लेना बिजली है ना गैस है ना पानी है बेसिक जो है आपकी वो है ही नहीं है तो आपका मुल्क तरक्की कैसे करेगा
इस टाइम तो सबसे ज़्यादा रेलवे को बहुत ध्यान देना चाहिए जो बहुत सरमाया देने वाली एक महकमा है नंबर 2 PIA एक हमारे ऐसा है अब हमारे काफ़ी मुसलमान है पाकिस्तानी है जो PIA में सफ़र नहीं करते उसकी कोई वजह तो होगी.
So the first commenter pointed out the sector that almost everyone thinks needs the most attention, which is the energy sector. And our second commenter suggests fixing the problems in Pakistan Railways and PIA on priority basis. Now, looking at social media, Asif Khan says education sector deserves the most attention. He says Pakistan's low literacy rate is contributing to poverty, terrorism, and joblessness. Maqbool Khan suggests agriculture as the backbone of the economy should be fixed first. He says power outages and a drop in the prices of agricultural commodities are destroying this sector. But Tahir Ahmed says that in Pakistan, money is invested in real estate, IT, telecom, and personal goods. And he says this kind of investment doesn't have the trickle-down effect. Pakistan, he says, needs labor-intensive markets for which manpower development is necessary. For the experts' take on this, let's go back to Aisha.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So we heard a couple of sectors. Let's discuss all of them. Energy. This was the big issue in elections. It's the big issue here. The announcement that circular debt will be ended in 60 days. They've already said they'll pay off all IPPs by the end of June. Dr. Iqbal, how are they planning to do that?
Well, very good question. They still have not defined exactly how they're going to do it. This is my problem with the budget in any case, because wherever it comes to specifics and steps to be taken to achieve their objectives, the budget doesn't say anything or says very little and contradictory. At one time, they talk about additional revenues that will come will be used towards payment for the circular debt.
But that's not normal for budgets, right?
No.
They usually have instruments built into them.
They have to. They're very explicitly in there, otherwise the budget is incomplete.
So why do you think this government's done it
Because,
this way?
you see, the budget has been created in a very short period of time. They haven't had time to look at what needs to be done. It's like something in progress. It's not something which is already there, concrete in terms.
Do you think they should have, Jeff, mentioned that this is a work in progress, that we are planning these instruments, these are the goals, while announcing the budget, rather than leaving it incomplete, as Dr. Iqbal says?
Well, I do think there is some of that. There is, in the budget speech, Minister Dar gave a very nice explanation of conceptually where he wants the economy to go over the coming years. And it may be true that in the actual execution of the budget, all of those ideas have not yet been fully translated into practice. But I do think it is a work in progress, and that over time, we hope that those policies will continue to be developed.
Okay, Dr. Iqbal, I read a column in Dawn by Khurram Hussain, who writes that the deficit was expected to be 7.5%. It was declared to be 8.5%, again, expectation. That will generate 300 billion extra rupees. Could that be used to pay off the circular debt?
No, because, see, there are two reasons. First of all, you cannot carry over debt from the previous year into the following year. You have to generate new instruments to be able to do that. That's the budget rule. The more important part is not that. The point is the budget will end on June 30th. New budget starts from June 30th, from July 1 onwards. That's a break with the past. You just cannot say, we have this much of resources that we borrowed in the past, we're going to carry them over. You don't do that. You create a new mechanism whereby additional funding comes in. That's the budget law. Otherwise, it won't work, number one. Number two, I think this is a lot of hearsay. We don't really know how it's going to turn out. My feeling is the budget deficit is likely to be more than 7.5% of GDP, but may not be as high as 8.8. This is true that a massive amount of spending did take place over the last month or two before the elections, and that may have increased the size of the budget deficit. The point, though, is we don't at this moment know how much that budget deficit will be precisely. When the IMF goes there, they will clearly find out, and they will be able to give a much better assessment of where things stand. What's more important, and that's what we were talking about earlier, about where additional revenues will come from. Remember, agriculture sector in this country is totally untaxed, or practically untaxed.
Capital
I agree.
gains.
Yeah, capital gains, real estate, and so on and so forth. This is true that it's a provincial subject. But if provinces were to raise more revenue through agriculture taxation, then the federal government's ability or need to transfer those funds to the provincial governments will decline, number one. Number two, overall macroeconomic position of the country becomes better. It doesn't really matter who collects that revenue.
Okay, now here's one of my points, which is we talked about the energy sector, but we see that while the budget is trying to cut back on a lot of expenses, minus the development, they've given more to development expenses. Defense spending has also gone up 10%. Is that a good idea, Jeff?
Well, it's a sovereign decision of Pakistan how much they want to spend on defense. And it's not something that we in the IMF would dictate to them where to spend your money. Pakistan has some very legitimate security concerns, and so it's really not for me to give an opinion on that. What I would say is that the desirable way for budget spending to evolve over time is to try to get spending out of unproductive areas and into productive areas. So one specific example that is in the budget is to cut back on untargeted subsidies and increase investment spending. That's a good thing. There's also a provision in the budget to increase income support programs, which I think is another good thing for protecting the poor. Moving more money into health and education would also be a good thing. But of course, there are severe limits to how much this spending can be increased as long as you haven't solved the revenue problem, unless you collect more money.
And I'm going to come to you with this question, but we asked this question of our viewers on social media. So let's go back once more to Sara Zaman and find out what you think about this defense spending.
Right, Aisha. I'm seeing a variety of opinions on our Facebook page on the issue of moving some of Pakistan's defense budget over to the public sector, particularly to improve health and education. On Facebook, Imran Afzal Wazir says, I think defense budget should be reduced, but now is not the right time. The threats to Pakistan's defense are greater than the problems of the health and education sectors. Rana Azam also says, not at all. Education and health can't provide sovereignty to a country. And Awais Noori thinks that a 2 to 3% decrease in the military's budget could help education and health sectors a lot. But Abrar Hussain points out that the problem is not the military's big budget, it's the corruption in these health and education sectors that's destroying them. And now let's take a quick look at some video comments.
हम उस खत्ते के अंदर हैं कि अगर हमारा दिफा नहीं होगा तो हम फिर हमारे लिए भी मुश्किलात पैदा हो सकती हैं। वो तो उसके लिए दूसरी राय नहीं है, लेकिन अगर हालात पीसफुल हो जाते हैं, दहशतगर्दी ख़त्म हो जाती है या कोई और हो जाती है, उससे फिर लेकर हम ये बजट जो है बहुत हिस्सा 35% जो हम दे रहे हैं आर्मी में दफा में दे रहे हैं, इसका कुछ हिस्सा जो है हम पब्लिक में ला सकते हैं।
डिफेंस पर हम कट लगाएं तो हेल्थ और इसके लिए क्या होगा? मसला है कट भी लगाए जाएंगे, लेकिन वो शो भी इतने डैमेज है कि उसको दोबारा पाँव पर खड़ा करना ही मसला है।
Now, both our video commenters pretty much said the same thing as our social media users. They also think that once the security situation in Pakistan improves, then maybe some of the money can be moved from defense to health and education, but that it won't help much since those two sectors have a lot more than just financial problems holding them back. To share your thoughts and read what others are saying, please log on to facebook.com/accesspointwith80 or join us on VOA Urdu's Facebook page.
Thank you very much, Sara. Dr. Zubair Iqbal, a smart idea, a well-needed idea, increasing 10% defense budget because of inflation, or is it not a good use of resources?
Look, I'm not an expert on military issues. Clearly, as Jeff said, there is a basic security problem there in the country as well as on the borders, and that you have to do something about it, and it doesn't come cheap. It's expensive.
And it has public support. Apparently, we've just heard.
However, I think the more important part is not to focus so much on this increase in spending. The focus, as Jeff said, really ought to be on revenue mobilization. Pakistan is one country where the revenue to GDP ratio is so low that it's an embarrassing situation. I mean, we are the fourth lowest tax to GDP ratio country in the world among the countries of the same income level. Why? I don't understand that. You've got to move towards improving revenue collection, because then it makes easier for you to be able to allocate for defense while also allocating for investment purposes, which will then improve growth in the economy. As the economy grows, its ability to generate revenues will also increase, and to that extent, the pressure for this allocation will become less.
Now, Jeff, one thing, when Pakistan comes to IMF, I mean, a huge chunk of Pakistan's budget is going towards paying interest payments. Yeah. Are there any, and I'm talking about not economists, but laymen want to know, is there any instrument where an IMF could reduce those payments, reduce the interest rates, give a break to Pakistan? Is there any such possibility?
Well, the way it works is that international organizations like the IMF already give countries a break, because we charge an interest rate that is much, much lower than what a country could get in the private market. I don't even think Pakistan could go out and borrow a large amount of money in the international market. But if it could, it would be paying over 10% interest. Right now, the IMF charges around 3%. So there's a huge break there as well. The World Bank, our colleagues, also have what they call IDA funds, which is development assistance money, which is at a minimal, virtually zero interest rate, and those funds are provided. Some of the bilateral donors, like USAID, are providing money in grants. There is no charge at all. There's no need to repay. And in the past, Pakistan has gone to an organization called the Paris Club, which consists of a group of bilateral donors who have restructured its bilateral debt. And so there have been mechanisms out there to help Pakistan with its debt burden. In the case of the IMF specifically, we do not have a mechanism to forgive debts or to postpone them for countries in Pakistan's income level. But as I said, the interest rate is already quite low.
Dr. Iqbal, would you want to add something to that? What can Pakistan do to reduce those huge interest payments? It's paying, what, more than 32% of the budget in interest payments alone?
Raise more revenue so that you reduce the need to borrow, and in the process, pay less interest. This is a reality. You have to encounter it. You can't pretend that it can be resolved. You cannot resolve it without making a fundamental change in the way the economy is run.
So let me move very quickly, since we're coming towards the end of the program, to some of the other things mentioned by our viewers. Railways, an important sector, an important public service. Do you see, Dr. Iqbal, something being done for the railway that's good enough?
Let's hope so, but we don't really know at this moment any precise strategy to work on fixing the railways. Railways is a critical public sector enterprise, but it's heavily underfunded. Subsidies implied are such that it's not making any profits. It's excessively overemployed.
How does that compare to the Indian railway? Please explain to me.
Broadly the same, but you see, in the case of India, remember that they are making savings elsewhere. You see, you have to look at the picture of the economy in its totality, not in subcomponents. Pakistan Railways used to be a very efficient organization. It's not an efficient organization anymore because there is an excessive amount of labor employed in it. If you can make it more efficient, if governance improves, you can conceivably get it right. Sell it off. Make it a joint venture and not subject to government control and interference. Maybe it will improve, but something has to give.
And same with PIA?
Same with PIA. All state enterprises in Pakistan, whether it's PIA, whether it's the railways, or whether it's the steel mill, the problem is excessive amount of interference and not allowing these institutions find their place through market-based pricing.
Do you think, Jeff, the youth, all the things introduced for the youth, they'll get interest-free loans or loans at very low rate interest, they'll get training, skill development. Do you think that will help the economy? And if so, what is the range we're looking at?
Well, my own view is that the best thing you can do for the youth of Pakistan is give them a healthy economy. Get the fundamental problems of the budget deficit and inflation and a current account deficit and debt crisis, get those issues resolved so that when these young people are coming up into the job market, there's a thriving private sector that can absorb them. Now, it is true that government can help with training programs and some of these other initiatives that you have mentioned, but I think that we shouldn't expect that those programs alone will solve the problem. It comes down to making an economy that can grow at a higher rate sustainably. As long as Pakistan's economy continues to grow at around 3% per year, you're going to have a chronic youth unemployment problem. Only boosting growth to 4, to 5, to 6 sustainably is going to not only create those jobs, but create jobs that pay more and more over time.
And people become more affluent. As a result, Dr. Zubair Iqbal, every government has a honeymoon period. This government came in with a heavy mandate, unexpectedly heavy. Nobody was expecting it. Do you think that they've made the tough choices that it's possible to make in the honeymoon period?
That's a very difficult question to answer because it depends upon the domestic context. And I personally don't know the domestic context. What I can say, though, is the following. The budget itself is not a very dramatic change from the past. They have overestimated revenues and they have underestimated the expenditure side. So they're likely to run into problems because of that. That does not give the impression as if the government is going to use its honeymoon period effectively. If they were to fix it well, one year, the very first year may be difficult, but then the fruits of that effort will start to bear down the road, and therefore they'll be in a much better position. They need to know that. My perception is that the leaders do need it, but they haven't had time, actually, to adjust to the mandate itself and go on from there.
Yes, they didn't have time, but it was expected that they'll win. Everybody, even before the election, was saying that Nawaz Sharif is going to come in as the PM.
Yeah, but as a part of a coalition, coalitions are always weak. You do not take very dramatic decisions which will then break up the coalition. They actually have behaved the way as if they're still working with the coalition. What they need to do is to come out much more forthright.
With all guns blazing and
and defining for the people the problems that they're going to face.
Behave like they have the majority that they do have, which allows them to make the kinds of decisions that they
They must have a constituency of their own that will do the job
in
that
their
needs
own
to be
party.
done.
And Jeff,
Yeah.
we'd love to have you back after you're back from Pakistan, find out what you guys discussed. I wish we had more time to talk about this, but our time today is up. I want to thank our guest, the IMF Mission Chief to Pakistan, Jeff Franks. Former World Bank Vice President Shahid Javed Burki couldn't join us, but Dr. Zubair Iqbal of the Middle East Institute is here with us, so thank you. And leave your questions and comments on our Facebook pages. Follow us on Twitter for updates, but don't forget to check out our website, urduvoa.com, for all kinds of interesting stories. Until next time, goodbye.